of our strategic planning forum. Just want to take a moment as we really start this morning, just take just a second to thank the young lady who just walked out of the room, the clerk to council, Ms. Annette Carrillo and her team for helping put this together. So hopefully that clap was loud enough. But today we're going to take the next couple of hours to get started on a couple of things that we believe will be helpful for the council to get a chance to review and give staff feedback on. Particularly, we're going to start by taking a look at some information provided by our Ombudsman's office. As many of you are aware, the Ombudsman serves as a great avenue of information from citizens to Richland County government. And so we want to take a look at some of the data that Richland County has received as a result of the Ombudsman's ability to get information from the community. Also, as we go into this next year, I've talked to the council before about this, but one of the things that we want to continue to do is we want to build our capacity as employees of the county, as department leaders and department managers. So we've kind of, a lot of us has already gone through the NACO high performance leadership training, but the next step that we're going to do is we're going to go through leading with analytics. And so that's going to be one of the areas that we're going to cover. And I'm actually going to invite council to participate in that area, because what we really want to try to do is use the information that the county gathers to try to help support the decisions that we make. Not every decision that we make will always be a data-driven decision. There's a people element that will always be a part of community service. And so we recognize that and we understand that, but we also want to do a good job of utilizing feedback that we get in terms of metrics to help us and inform us in making our decisions. And so with that being said, I'm going to bring up Ms. Judy Carter, our Ombudsman, and we're going to kick off this morning's start with an update from the Ombudsman's office. Ms. Carter?
Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. And we'll talk about the Ombudsman's office. Many people know our office as the complaint department, but we try to say that we are the compliments, concerns, and requests. The office was established in 1999, and we have been operating for 25 years. Prior to the Ombudsman's office centralizing, all the requests went to each individual department. And I'm not sure if you all are aware, but Councilmember Eddie Weaver, he was spearheading this project to centralize county operations. Councilmember Livingston, he probably is aware of this because I think he was on council at the time, and he's probably been with me through the entire journey. We started off as a very, very small office. Recently, we just received more positions. Once we get into our numbers, you will see that we are a very strong office, even though we're very small. Our office actually strives for operational excellence. And the departments and the citizens depend on the work that we do and the information that we provide. And in order for them to deliver the services timely, we have to provide the accurate information. We have to make sure that we have all the information. And so once we do that, that helps the service delivery be on time. We operate with strict policies and procedures, and our office reports to the county administrator, even though we work very independently on most occasions. There's times when I have to call Mr. Brown because I need guidance, and I just want you to know that he's always there. Usually when I call, it's usually kind of like an emergency situation, and within 5 minutes I will get an email or a call, so he will guide me through. Customer service is our number one priority. Our number two priority is accuracy. Okay, our operations. We have 11 authorized positions. 10 will be filled as of February 12th. And at that time, we will have 7 call takers. Right now, we have 5. To achieve organizational excellence, it is essential that our staff be trained. I'm a customer service facilitator, and I'm trained and certified. And I administer customer service training to my staff each week. Last year, we administered 74 training classes, and in 2023, we administered 145. The county operates with 2 databases. One is One Stop, and one is On Base. One Stop, okay. One Stop is the app that we use for service requests. On Base is what we use for our Freedom of Information requests. And we're looking to roll out a mobile app in approximately 6 months. We also want to get to a point where we use our county employees and our county staff to identify concerns and requests when they ride through the county. Many citizens report, well, I saw a county vehicle, but they didn't report this problem. So if we're in the area, we would like for county staff to identify a problem, report the problem, so that we can be proactive in trying to fix the problems. Our performance measures. In 2023, we received 116,289 calls. Last year, we received 111,204. Last year, we received in 2023, 82,919 service requests. We received 13,572 emails and 1,399 Freedom of Information requests. As you can see, our call volume is growing. Our service requests are growing. In 2023, we received 58 employee complaints. And when we say employee complaints, that's on all county departments. Last year, it was 30. In 2023, we received 34 employee compliments. Last year, we received 31. So we do have people that occasionally do call in and commend our employees. When we say an employee compliment, we kind of weed through that process because many people call and say, oh, thanks for picking up my trash, or thanks for fixing the sign. We consider a compliment something where the employee goes above and beyond the call of duty and not just do their normal job duties. So in 2023, we received 1,815 requests from elected officials. On average, we receive 1,600 to 2,300 calls a week. And we receive 1,700 to 1,800 service requests a week. Our error rate is extremely low, as you can tell. We pride ourselves on accuracy. Community engagement. Often we get requests to come out to community meetings or community events and attend. So the Ombudsman's Office tracks that information. We have several departments who actually, we receive requests through our department, and we have a service request type for those departments, as you can see. But many departments attend community meetings. We are just not tracking them in a central location. So when we went through our strategic planning conferences and meetings, one thing that we discussed is to start tracking all departments' attendance in the community. So hopefully in the future, we will know everybody who's attending meetings and where they are. The top 10 service requests are solid waste, animal care, Ombudsman's Office, roads and drainage, special services, code enforcement, the auditor's office, planning department, treasurer's department, and ESD. Our days to completion can vary from 2 days to 15 days on average. The Ombudsman's Office has service requests. We assign service requests to our office. For instance, our any outside agency request is assigned to our office, and our Freedom of Information requests are assigned to the Ombudsman's Office. So that's why the Ombudsman's Office has service requests. Callbacks. Often, if the service is not provided in a timely manner, citizens will call back. So we track that information, and we track the number of callbacks. And in order to try to provide the service, what we do is we send an email to the appropriate ACA or the county administrator and the department director when we receive callbacks to try to expedite that request. Okay, reports for council. Each week, the Ombudsman's Office generates many reports. Some people request reports. Councilmember Newton has been requesting a weekly council report for her district. I think, since she took office. And we email that report to her every week. We are passing out to you a report for your district for last week. We can generate reports, and the report that you'll see will show the top number of service requests for the district, the top 10 requests, and the top 10 locations of the requests. If you let us know, we can provide as much information as you want or as little information as you want. You can get a detailed summary, which will include all the comments, all the detailed information from the department, from the citizen, or you can just get a summary of the number of requests. Okay? The service requests by council district. Every district is unique, and the needs vary in every district. One thing we know that we all have in common is that many citizens contact our office. So I'll go to each district. Council District 1 received 7,564 requests. Solid waste, animal care, roads and drainage, ombudsman, and auditor were the top requests for that district. District 2 received 7,374 requests. The top service requests were solid waste, animal care, ombudsman's office, roads and drainage, and code enforcement. District 3 received 5,088 requests. Solid waste, animal care, ombudsman's office, special services, and roads and drainage were the top requests. District 4, solid waste, ombudsman's office, animal care, auditor's office, treasurer's office, and they received 5,481 requests. District 5 received 1,240 requests. Solid waste, ombudsman's office, animal care, special services, auditor's office. Council District 6 received 1,296 requests. Solid waste, ombudsman's office, animal care, auditor's office, and assessor's office. District 7 received 8,857 requests. Solid waste, animal care, ombudsman's office, roads and drainage, and code enforcement. District 8 received 8,797 requests, which were solid waste, animal care, ombudsman's office, roads and drainage, and code enforcement. District 9 received 8,425 requests, which were solid waste, animal care, ombudsman's office, roads and drainage, and code enforcement. District 10 received 6,362 requests, which were solid waste, animal care, ombudsman's office, roads and drainage, special services. District 11 received 5,135 requests, which were solid waste, animal care, ombudsman's office, roads and drainage, and code enforcement. Employee
Ms. Carter?
initiatives. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm right here.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
For all of those, it appears that solid waste was the #1 complaint, and we know the county does not provide that service per se, it's more so contracted out.
Mhm.
Are you able to go through and provide any type of stats to Public Works to say, this vendor has received 60% of the complaints that we receive through the ombudsman, to give them feedback? Because that's a lot of calls related to solid waste that we're having to manage for outside vendors.
Yes, we can break the reports down at any time by district, by streets, by the collector, the hauler. And I think Mr. Maloney does have that information. We do provide that information.
And is any of that used in our review or, evaluation of the vendor?
Mr. Brown, you want to?
The short answer is yes, and there's two components. One component is a function of solid waste directly managing with meetings with the vendor as they get that information. The other component is a contractual matter. So there's a threshold that is reached where our team is communicating with the haulers, talking about their specific performance. and then potentially a notice to cure is sent. So if they're not doing a job up to a certain level, it becomes basically really poor, then the county then initiates through procurement a contractual step that talks about basically you're not meeting the requirements of the agreement. And so now we're triggering potential future action with your organization. And certainly I have both Mr. Maloney and Mr. Ladishkin who can talk more specifically about that. But I know for a fact that we do have at least one hauler where that is currently something that we've gone through right now, and we have done that prior to in the past with haulers as well.
And Mr. Brown, do you know, have we ever, I don't know, considered maybe having part of the vendor's contract or somehow that they are contributing to the cost of a employee that directly just deals with solid waste complaints? So, because it appears that the ombudsman office, that's what they get. Like that's majority of the call. So is there a way to look at tying that to the vendor and somehow, developing a position that deals with that?
That is certainly something we can look at. I will tell you that the next go-round of contracts, I think this current body as it sits will have a good feel for how this process has gone with previous contracts, going to new contracts. And so I think some of that conversation as we consider those providers will be very helpful because we've had a number of providers where there's only a small few, which is some of the issue that we have. And then some of those providers feel very strongly that they have the county in a position to where they can describe their scenario in a way that's to their favor, that our community would be more receptive to, and so that the staff of Richland County in their position may be different from that of the council. And so they try to utilize those nuances in their contractual negotiations with the organization to try to get their voices louder heard by council than maybe the staff. So I think now that you've gone through this process with these vendors, you will have a better understanding and a better opportunity to talk about what you want to see, but we can certainly talk about tying that in. I can tell you we do tie in right now penalties that are associated with a lack of performance. And I think you all know that once money is not an issue for you, then really service, you got to talk about what can we do different. Because sometimes the fines just don't hit people in the pockets, even though the fines that are there now are completely different than they were before.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I just want to follow up to that point that Ms. Mackey was making, because it is a major concern of mine when it comes to our haulers. And if I remember correctly, there was a conversation that we had, and in order to make a formal complaint against the haulers, it had to go through procurement. And I may be, so I'm asking this for somewhat of a clarification because I'm thinking now that it's going through, solid waste is getting these complaints, because I am encouraging my constituents to contact the Ombudsman's office so that we can have a track record of what's taking place. But it is a concern if solid waste is getting this report, at what point contractually do we obligate them and tie it to the complaint? Because I know for me, I do a lot of contract work, and it never goes on the books unless the complaint goes through procurement. So is that still is that the process that we have here?
So what I'll do is I'll ask Director Maloney to address that so he can walk you through the process. And then after the handoff happens, I'll just ask just briefly, but fully, Mr. Dishkin, if you'll talk about what happens once you receive a certain level of information from solid waste as it relates to the contractual obligations and how we can converse with the vendor.
Thank you, sir. So right now we have monthly meetings with the contractors, and we review their scorecard with them. So from the customer service numbers you're seeing, we're reviewing the amount of valid complaints. They are allowed in that collection day to make a recovery, so that we do get calls if they're late picking it up, wondering if they're coming. So that does drive some of that, but that is considered an invalid complaint if they do get it on the collection day. Once we do see a problem, and we see a problem in one of our areas right now, we go to procurement with that, and that creates a notice to cure letter, and one has been submitted to the contractor recently. In the past, we had that same thing happen. What was that, last spring? Not quite a year ago. So we had one in Area 5A. That would cover pretty much council districts, a little bit of 7, 8, and 9, and where we have a lot of backyard pickup. A new contractor was brought into that area, and we literally took an area away from a contractor for failure to perform. That has improved. That contractor that was failing to produce is also in Area 3, and that was part of their cure. Was we're going to back out of Area 5A, take on just Area 3. We're watching that because that may not be good enough yet. So Area 3 is kind of in the northeast. It's very a big growing area, and that area is constantly taking on new residents. So as we address that, we may have a problem there, but Area 1 is the area right now that we're addressing. We're not just looking at garbage service and recycling, but some of the biggest problems seasonally has been in yard waste pickup. Because council allowed for more collection inspectors in a previous budget, we hired them. We've sent 6 collection inspectors into Area 1. We required in the cure for the contractor to provide all types of yard equipment, boom trucks, leaf collectors, and they've been out for the last 3 days cleaning up all of Area 1. Well, in Area 3, we may have that same thing that will follow up with that type of total cleanup. But as far as how quickly and they respond, that we sit down at the table with Ms. Ladishkin and the contractor on those cures, and we look for a true and honest resolution. Each night, the contractors bring in a total work completed and showing their rate that they've picked everything up. And Area 1, for instance, we found some of those reports to be inaccurate, and those are that's why the cure letter went out. So though that is the first step. If they're not curing it immediately, we go to the next step, and the next step could be to execute and prepare for a new contractor in that area.
It'd be helpful for me to know, for example, trying to make a difference between those things that we're getting complaints about that are not a part of the contract for the haulers, and those that are. For example, a lot of complaints I get is, they didn't pick it up, and I call and they say, well, it was longer than 4 feet. Well, that's not a contract problem. If they're not required to pick it up, or they might say something like, they didn't pick it all up. Well, we're not requiring them to pick it all up. It's not their problem it's not being picked up. We need to look at whether or not we need to do anything about contracts and so forth. So this is a big issue for a lot of reasons, not just a contract problem, a collector's problem. So we need to look at it from a more global perspective and try to look at what are some of the main concerns that they have, but this has always been a problem. We got to think about the magnitude of what we're talking about. You go to each house at least over 100 times a year, right? You think about the number of times of collection. You multiply that by the times the number of homes you got. Think about how many times you're talking about someone can complain, have an opportunity to complain about something.
Yes.
to the request for you all to come and present, and to you for the services that your office provides.
Thank you.
I think it's so important, and the fact that we're going to increase the use of data in determining our priorities in our strategic plan. And that's why I think that this report is so important. Following up with Mr. Livingston, if we could get an idea of what solid waste is and what are the major complaints coming out of solid waste. Because if it's not the contractor's issue, then it's another service issue that we need to look at our policies to see if we're the reason that the problem is happening. So we have, if you have to have, just for an example, the so many inches or so many things placed in one area, and you put it in the wrong area, then maybe we need to look at, we need to change the policy, what can be placed or what cannot be placed. So I think it's important to look at this data to see how we can use our policies and all to improve the services for the constituents we serve. Because if we continue to get major problems because of policies we have, then that policy needs to be reviewed. So that's why I think this is really so important. The other area with animal care, you know, what can you say, what does that include with the animal care? Is it complaints because the cats are all over my, all in my neighborhood, all over my porch, taking over my cars? Nothing personal. What is, nothing personal to cat lovers. Getting back seriously. What are the complaints coming from animal care? You know, where can we sort of target in to look at the issues and to see how we may be able to address them? Is that possible?
Yes, we do run a detailed report. This is a summary
I know.
report. So the summary report is just going to have the department and how many requests they received. The detailed report, which in our council administrative report that we send every week, it has the detailed report. For solid waste, it will have every service request type that we receive request on. And for animal care, it would also have it. For animal care, I can say one of the top requests are stray animals, stray dogs. That is one of the ones that most people call in about. Mm-hmm. One for solid waste that I know there was a lot of conversation about, and it will probably eliminate a lot of their service requests, was the bulk item collection. At one point years ago, there was a certain time of the month, and residents were requested to put the items out, and they will be picked up within that week.
Okay.
So they didn't have to call. Now they require them to call in to request a pickup. So that does increase the call volume and the service requests. And I know there was some talk about maybe doing it a little differently. Mike, do you want to speak to that, or Mr. Brown?
Sure, I'll let Mike talk about that, and I'll just bring up one policy thing that I know. It's a good question that you asked, Mr. Livingston, and you might recall some of this conversation, and we shied away from this because it was a concern that it would be a burden on the citizens related to a policy matter that the staff requested for consideration, and that would be to bag and bundle. Bagging and bundling would help eliminate the idea of what's too much, what's in a proper place, what's the right size. If you take a look at, and what we've done for any council member who is interested, when we get concerns about solid waste items, myself as the county administrator, because we've had some consistent concerns in certain areas, I've gone out to these areas. We have photos. We've showed how Special Services has cleaned up the area. We've shown what the area looked like, to Mr. Livingston's kind of question about things being in the right place or the right size. And a lot of these things are, it's a situation where you give the hauler an opportunity to flag an item, because there are parts of the solid waste pickup that are not proper, but there are some that are proper. And it just creates a little bit of inconsistency. And so it creates an opportunity for some of that. And so again, I'm not saying that there's a decision that has to be made right now. I'm just mentioning to you in terms of a policy perspective, that's why that was suggested, because that would help eliminate some of the confusion about whether or not something was properly tagged and for pickup. And so again, maybe there are other options, but what we've seen is a lot of times they're trash piles and they're not trash pickups, and as examples. And so we have lots of photos and lots of before and after to kind of help provide some more details of what that looks like. Again, not saying it's a one answer fits all, but I would just say to you, policy-wise, that's the type of policy that eliminates some of the variance from the hauler and from the county in terms of the constituent that's using the service.
Mr.
So,
Brown?
yes, ma'am.
Just to follow up, and with the policies, but we also have to look at the impact on the constituents. In terms of policies, we need to make sure that we are implementing policies that make it more difficult for the constituents to conform to the policies. Particularly, we look at senior citizens and others that it's very difficult to do those pickups and to put the different trash bundles together, and also those are the things that as we look at policy, I also want us to consider how it's more accessible and easier for the constituents too. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I do have a question. I'm looking at this council report for District 6. My question is, when it says the location of the service request locations, I notice it has the street names. Is it possible to add addresses to that?
Yes.
And can we, as a council person, request
Yes.
those addresses if we wanted to send a postcard and say, hey, hope you enjoyed the county services, let me know if I need to follow up, something like that?
Yes,
Can we
that-
request that?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be a detailed
It's an
report.
idea.
The detailed report will have the information that you're requesting.
So we can request that?
Yes, all you
Okay.
have to do is just email my office and we will
Okay,
get
thank
that to you.
I'll respond to Judy's point out on the bulk item pickup. So the report, and we had 48,234 service requests in solid waste. About 16,000 of those are appointments being made for bulk item pickup. So that's anywhere from 25% to 33% of the total calls are dealing with the appointments. The pro side of doing that is when they make the appointment, we can tell them what is allowed in bulk item, because we do get some items that we can't pick up, electronics and things that, that people are trying to get rid of that might consider that a bulk item. That has to go to a recycle center if you're going to, get rid of it. But if we at one time did have the curbside type bulk item in, Judy, that, it was before my time, but I understand it was monthly.
Yes.
And I don't know what kind of reaction changed it, but there was something where, people were putting other things out for other, like Boy Scout pickup or something, and the garbage service picked that up, and it created a new consideration that occurred with council to make it by appointment. But it obviously does have that advantage on the customer service side of cutting out anywhere from 25 to 33% of our calls if we did just have it curbside.
Okay.
Ms. Carter,
Yes.
if I may, just a few things. First, a few compliments. So long before I was on council, the wheel fell off my garbage bin, and I called the ombudsman office like the Friday before the 4th of July, and I was like, man, nobody's ever going to come and handle this. But I tell you what, the day after the holiday, that was fixed, and I was so impressed. And I called the county to say, hey, thank you, that was great. But I want to tell everybody, because even like right during holiday times, you're always there for people. And thank you also for the reports that you provide. It's been helpful for me, but more than that, just the service. I go to community meetings all the time, and I usually start by saying, let me give you the phone number for the ombudsman, and everybody is often like, we already have the phone number for the ombudsman, but you can tell us anyway. So I appreciate that. And then since we were talking about bulk pickup, I do think that that would be something it's something for us to consider how we do it, whether or not we change the policy. The fact of the matter is that so many constituents don't know that that's the policy. And so I often will walk through neighborhoods and I see that people have left things out that I know in my heart they haven't called to report. And then they're calling me and they're like, hey, why didn't somebody pick it up? And I have to tell them, they're never going to pick that up, because it's a different group that does it, and you have to let them know. And for those of us who have some areas that are close to the city, it can cause even more confusion because the city has a different bulk pickup policy than we do. So across the street from some people, they may be handling things differently. One thing that I would like to propose for consideration, not necessarily a deep conversation right now, is the reports that I get are really great and really detailed. I wonder if there was one point where I was like, hey, can I have access to the ombudsman report? And they're like, you do not want to get into the weeds of that system. But sometimes I do have, specific questions about a specific constituent or a specific issue, and I don't necessarily want to bother the people at the ombudsman's office who are working so hard to say, can you track down, Jim Smith's garbage report. So I don't know if there's an opportunity for our clerk to have access to that, or if there's a different process where sometimes we just, have that specific question, because in my case, it might not be that they reported it this week, and so I'm having to dig through multiple weeks of reports and searching and finding, trying to figure out where this issue is. And sometimes Jim Smith says they reported an issue, and they didn't tell anybody but Facebook. And so, just if we had some way that I could drill down into that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
We can provide training, and we can give you access. Anyone who would like access to the system, you can have access, and we will have IT to train you, to give you the simple training, just so that you can search a particular location or particular service request type or the name. So we can help you with that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, and thank you again, and I appreciate just what my colleagues have said, all the work that you all do, because everybody gets your number, everybody.
They do.
But I don't know if my question is geared toward you or the administrative staff. I have an awesome garbage collection person in one of my areas, and I can say Johnson real quick. And when the others are not doing their job, he will actually go out, pick up that, make that right, and kind of correct whatever they did wrong, just to keep the citizens satisfied. His motto is kind of like ours. It's not just about the area we serve, it's about all of Richland County. So when we have contractors like that, what can we do to give them more of an incentive to take more of those contracts or more portions of those? Or is that something that we can or cannot do?
That is something that we actually have done. So when Director Maloney mentioned that part of their process is meeting with the haulers and going over a scorecard, is basically like what you all do for me. It's a review for them. So they get a review that balances what they're saying they've done with what we're showing that they have done to address any inaccuracies that may exist. And those haulers who are high performers, you may have heard Director Maloney mention this before, high performers then have the opportunity, if it presents itself, to potentially have more than one area. And the contractor you happen to mention is actually a contractor because of their high performance throughout their tenure with the county. They actually did take on and were awarded more opportunity for collection services where another hauler lost that opportunity. So there is a mechanism in place where the council, through its contractual process and it's the agreements, identifies whether or not an individual hauler is able to handle more, and potentially when space is open, have the opportunity to bid and be awarded for that service. So that does exist. Councilmember English.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Ms. Carter, if you
Yes.
would continue, and I know we have several other key topics we want to get to today.
Okay.
Thank
On a
you.
lighter note, we'll talk about employee initiatives. Our employees are the lifeline of Richland County and our operations. We value our employees and their dedicated service. We look for many ways to recognize them and show our appreciation. In the past, we have acknowledged employees for National Employee Appreciation Day, which is the first Friday in March, National Customer Service Week, which is the first week in October, Employee Recognition, which is when we would do a lunch or dinner, and it's a type of reward program. And we've also had family picnics. In 2019, 2018, we had family picnics. We allowed the employees to bring at least 4 family members. We had lots of games, lots of fun, food, prizes. We used Western Lake, and we used, I think at the last one, the Richland County Activity Center on Garners Ferry Road, the complex in the back. So what we're looking for is, we would like your input on suggestions on what we can do to acknowledge and recognize our employees.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? This concludes my report. Thank you.
So I'm going to stand here, but I'm going to really act as a moderator for this particular portion of the discussion, because it's about affordable housing. And so hopefully what we can learn from this conversation on today is some specific steps, and leave here with some potential action guidance on really how we want to target and address affordable housing. I'll tell you what's in your packet, and I won't go over everything, but we can point out and go to some information that NACO has provided. But beginning on page 81, there is some information there in an article called All Hands on Deck. Ports offer models for housing production partnerships. And if you've had an opportunity to read that, and if you haven't, that's okay, you can read it later. But what it does is it talks about how some of the ports authorities were looking at the issue of affordable housing, and talked about some ways that they began to try to address it. And as an organization that's looking to address affordable housing, we thought it would be helpful to provide models or information of different agencies and how they have sought to address these things, to help give you ideas as a council as to how you might want to address it. Certainly, we've talked about on yesterday and many times before how Richland County Council has set aside initially $4 million to positively affect affordable housing. And the question that you've been grappling with and working with community members and hearing feedback from agencies is, well, how are you going to actually invest that money? And what mechanism are you going to utilize to spend that $4 million towards affordable housing? So hopefully this information in the packet provides you some options and some ideas that maybe you previously considered and didn't know quite how you might want to do, or maybe it gives you some jumping points to have additional conversations that you want to have, whether that's through committee meetings or as a council, to address affordable housing. Also in your packet on pages 103, you'll see there's an article in there, Advancing Local Housing Affordability. So NACO developed, the National Association of Counties developed a housing task force, and they issued a final report. This final report contains information that they again looked at and said, you know, hey, counties across the nation, here is something that we think you should consider when you're addressing affordable housing. I want to talk about some things that you all probably already know, but I'm just going to mention it for the purpose of this conversation to really remind us, and then we'll kind of get into a little bit more feedback from the council. Also, just to help guide this conversation more specifically, if you said, well, Brown, I definitely want to have a conversation, but I have all kind of thoughts about this. If you look at page 123, that's the National Association of Counties Affordable Housing Toolkit for counties. And so what they do is they provide a framework that was going through, that was kind of developed as a part of the housing initiative to address affordability. And that framework begins to give you some ideas that you can kind of shape this conversation around or shape your thoughts around. So I did want to share that with you as well. And if you kind of want to see that with examples, again, looking at page 123, they show you different counties and what they've done going forward. And then if you want to kind of look at the framework by itself, you could go to page 111, where it kind of breaks down, 5 areas that organizations should consider related to affordable housing. So a couple things I want to do real quick. I'm going to read a couple definitions because I think that I would like for us to really start tackling what Richland County is really trying to target when it comes to positively impacting housing accessibility. So here is a definition of affordable housing. Housing a household can afford where they have to spend no more than 30% of their income. If you read one of these articles that I've just shared with you, again, we're not getting into pro or con, but I'm just guiding the conversation. There are some thoughts that definition does not appropriately account for income, in the sense that a person, in the article uses an example, a person with a family household income of $650,000 can spend 30% of their household income and still have plenty of money left over for other things, as compared to a person who has a household income of $30,000, 30% of that, they would not be able to spend money on housing and then not be concerned about additional needs. So while that is a general definition and that's a metric that's used, one of the articles points out that you still have to account for what those variables are in total household income. Which brings me to the second definition. And it's something that we're trying to talk a little bit more about. And I knew we have grant people here who can talk a little bit more about this. But when we talked about workforce housing, okay? And the general definition is workforce housing is defined as housing that is affordable for those earning between 80% and 120% of area median income. So part of the question is, when we talk about housing accessibility, is Richland County looking to target workforce housing? Or are we looking to target affordable housing? And I think that conversation is something I would like to hear us kind of talk about, so we can kind of determine really what maybe things we should put in place to target. So you have the general definition of workforce housing, but I'm going to add another component. So generally with workforce housing, there's a target, right? So you're for example, you're targeting potential public sector sometimes jobs where certain individuals that perform certain work, you're looking to provide easy access for them to be able to work. So there could be location components, there could be work components. So for example, teachers, firefighters, law enforcement, those types of things are sometimes what's targeted when you talk about workforce housing. So I know during our economic development conversations, we've talked to some of the people that have been coming on board and beginning to have these conversations. But again, I think understanding how Richland County Council is thinking about targeting housing accessibility, that's going to really help us determine, what steps we might want to take. I'm not saying we can't do both, but I want us to make sure that when we're talking about affordable housing and workforce housing, we're not lumping that in together, because people are hearing different things and we're not necessarily sure that we are targeting what you want to target. So I've been doing a lot of talking and starting this conversation off. It's not designed for me to do a lot of talking. I would hope there'd be a lot of back and forth. I'm not looking for a right or wrong answer. We do have $4 million that we've set aside. We do have a housing initiative that I know on some level you want to address. We do have a community whether it's Richland County locally or the state of South Carolina or the nation where there's a housing crisis. So I know we want to do something and we want to be impactful. So that's what I'm here to do, is try to help find out how can we take this to the next step where we're putting something in place to allow council to make a decision that can be impactful in our community. So the floor is wide open for council members. I'll certainly defer to the chair as to recognizing, but in general, that's how I want to kind of start the conversation.
Okay, I see Councilwoman McBride and Councilwoman Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And I think before we can even begin a discussion, we needed the information that you put forth just now, because it's hard to discuss when you don't really understand the issue that you're dealing with or the problems. So you did not talk too much. You actually started us off with some good information as to the differences or the similarities with affordable housing and workforce. And it's still more information would help you to be able to make a better decision or to have more clarification in terms of what's one and what's the other. Such as in workforce housing, we had this discussion in economics development, because it could be any housing if you're working, if people are working. So that's a real big issue. And for my input now, and I've tried to do a lot of research on it, I'm still not real comfortable with the definitions of the workforce housing as well as affordable housing, because we do a percentage of the income, and how we look in Richland County at the numbers that we have in terms of salaries, the numbers that we have that are in need of housing, and all of that data will help me be able to make a more informed decision. Thank you.
So if I could just ask a follow-up question, and I know you asked for general information. So you're looking to find out, for example, what is the median income of the average median income in Richland County, how many individuals that are at that income threshold, how many of them are maybe renters, how many are homeowners, how many are not able to be renters or homeowners.
Looking at the need for Richland County, and where are we having this this issue, this problem of not having affordable housing in Richland County, and what citizens are in the greatest need? What is the greatest need for lack of housing? Are you understanding that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I can tell you, if we were to use, and I'm not going to quote the name of the agency because I don't want them to say I misrepresented their information, but there have been a number of agencies who have reached out to council members, who reached out to administration, and in one of those conversations, I know that they said their research had identified that roughly over 16,000 individuals in the county of Richland as a whole, there's a housing need for of that number. And then we asked about the unincorporated number, and I believe that number was around, and I don't know if ACA Thomas, you remember, I think 7,700, something like that. So the total number was larger for the county of Richland than the unincorporated area, I believe was just a little bit less than 8,000 that had been identified at that time of their assessment in the affordable housing issue. But I know you're asking still for more detail, where, geographically, where that number located, and I understand the general information related to that.
And the last part of it is that the city has a housing department too. And then we have unincorporated Richland County. All of it is the county, but where are all the resources going? So that's very important, another factor.
Thank you.
Ms. Barron?
Thank you, and thank you, Administrator Brown, for giving us this information. I think it's very helpful for us to be informed about what we're doing, but I think it's, for those that may be watching this now or later, and even some of our staff in the room, how did we get here to even have this conversation? I think we probably need to really go back to that, and that was through our opera funds, we decided, through the coronavirus ad hoc committee, that we would set aside $4 million. And yes, a lot of it was because we were hearing from particular groups that this was a crisis and that we didn't want to feel like we were ignoring the crisis. But to that point, I think that the question that I'd like to ask my colleagues is this something that we want to champion as a county and say that we are going to take the lead on an affordable housing project, or do we want to support an entity that's already existing, that's already doing the work? And when we have this conversation in committee, for the last 2 years, what we, it appears that that the council is not interested in necessarily taking on an affordable housing project. So as we continue to have this conversation, I really want us to be mindful of just that. Are we looking to get into that business, or do we just, really want to support what's going on and be a good neighbor and be a good government entity to say, hey, we've got $4 million that we want to invest in the work that you're already doing? Because I am not a fan of duplicating services or to go out here to do something to say that we are doing it. Look at what Richland County is doing. I take just as much joy in saying, hey, look at what Richland County partnered, or who Richland County partnered with to ensure that we had more housing, whether it's affordable or whether it's workforce housing. The crisis is the crisis. And so I, personally speaking, I'm glad that you were able to give a definition for both, because people are now using them interchangeably. And we have to be educated enough to say, okay, this is what Richland County is doing. So again, I'm gonna just say it again. I hope that when we finish this conversation that we will have, Mr. Brown, you'll have some clear orders, because it's moved away. It's no longer ARPA funds, so we don't have a timeline on it. But if there's a crisis, then we still have a timeline, because we want to be, we really want to get these dollars into the community so that we can, really help and be a blessing to people who need it. Thank you.
Mr. I'm sorry, Ms. Newton, Mr. Livingston was next, and then we'll have
thank
Ms.
you.
Newton.
I would just suggest, thank you. I would probably want to suggest something we're probably trying to move forward, not for the debate or discussion today, but at least something for us to kind of think about. Because I think right now we're dealing with, I would say, a short-term and a long-term issue as it relates to housing. The short-term one is, I think we have $4 million that we need to go ahead and move forward with. And I think one way of looking at that is we may want to just consider working with someone like the Mills Housing Development Corporation, somebody who's already doing this work, creating a memorandum of agreement with them, or some form or something about how we want them to do it and how they spend it or whatever, and work that out so we can move forward with that. And then perhaps think about creating a ad hoc housing committee to talk about anything long-term that we want to do. And what kind of initiative we want to come up with might be the best way to move forward, because I would hate for us to sit on this $4 million for the next 6 months trying to figure out what we want to do. So I would suggest that's something we think about. And I certainly agree with Ms. Barron's comment about, I don't think the county, I don't want to get into the housing business. That's why we give money to, the museums, the libraries, the schools, and other folks, because that's what they do. And I think we ought to do that with housing too. So that's my suggestion in terms of how we at least think about moving forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Livingston.
May I ask a
Yes,
follow-up
ma'am.
question?
Yes, sir.
Please don't lose your thought, Ms. Newton. Mr. Livingston, this is not to put you on the spot, but it is a kind of a back and forth kind of dialogue, hopefully. So you talked about the long-term aspect of this particular issue. You mentioned that maybe short-term, long-term. Just kind of in your general thought, not asking for a specific recommendation, do you see this as something where the county potentially does something with the $4 million now, form some sort of committee, standing ad hoc, and then they look at potentially how that's going to work and being a partner in the future related to the housing crisis?
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Newton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I think my comments are maybe a synergy of some of the other things that we'd heard. So first, from my perspective, I guess I just want to clarify that what I think the county needs to do is make addressing housing availability a priority. That does not mean that the county builds housing. It doesn't mean the county owns housing. It means that we make it a priority for our county about how can we address this issue. I looked at a map of all of the places in the country that had enough affordable housing, and there were no places on that map. It was just dark. So we're not unique in this, but we can make it a priority. And so I think one of the challenges with the conversation that we're having is to pick a random number. There are 50 ways to do affordable housing, and so different people have different things in their minds. Some people are thinking, oh, the county could build housing. I don't want the county to build housing. Some people are saying, oh, we could pay someone else to build housing. I don't want to pay. You know, there are all these different options, but I think it starts from saying, if our priority is that we have attainable housing, or insert whatever adjective, what does that look like for the county? Because the fact of the matter is, there are more things that we can do by changing our policies than there are that we can do specifically with our dollars. I think that the $4 million that we have are fantastic, but let's be frank, it ain't actually a lot of money, particularly if you're looking at building things. So I think we start by making it a priority. Secondly, for me, if I can echo my friend and colleague, Ms. McBride, I think that there's some information that's missing. So there's been different times when staff has provided information. I know we talked at one point in one of our committees about, you know, did we want to bring in a firm to do an assessment of the Richland County housing stock, and, you know, what we have and what the programs are, make recommendations. Someone else suggested, well, the city of Columbia already did a study and the data's there. Whoever has the data, that person is not me. And so, you know, if we could have that to be helpful to figure out how we have this conversation. So anyway, I think we make it a priority, but as much as I'm concerned about the $4 million, I'm more concerned about our policies and opportunities that we have to create incentives so that, to Ms. Barron's point, some of these other groups that have this in their wheelhouse that do it every day can do it. But there's so much we can do on the policy front. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newton.
Councilman.
Yes. Councilman Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, two issues. One, the $4 million that the feds gave us for ARPA. I think a quick way to get rid of that is to just, you know, do rent subsidies. It keeps people in place. We're not building anything. When the feds were sending out checks for COVID, I know some landlords weren't taking them, but my company was taking it by the bucketful, and it kept a lot of people in houses that, you know, had lost their jobs. So that was an easy way, not a lot of paperwork. They're already in the facility. So I'm sure we could partner with someone already doing housing to say, hey, we want to subsidize for Richland County residents based on income. Here's $4 million. Y'all figure it out with some oversight from council. So that's one thing. The second thing, if we want to do a permanent fix, I think we should look at something with tax incentives, property tax incentives for developers going forward. There's a property on South Beltline in my district with windows boarded up. I mean, that thing could, it's probably 20 apartments. But no investor is going in there and putting the money in that because the economics are just not there. We could go in and give a 5-year abatement for property taxes if that developer would do affordable housing in there. You know, we're not risking anything, just, you know, get the building fixed up, you agree to do this, yada, yada, and boom, we get 20 apartments ready, affordable housing. That's my thought.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam
No,
Chair.
I was going to say thank you.
So some of the things that you all are identifying and highlighting are some of the initiatives that, when you get a chance, when you look at some of the findings from NACO, and they give you counties that have done this, these are some of the things that are out there. I will tell you that, just like Ms. Newton says, and it's like with most issues that affect a general populace, you know, there's a spectrum. So the information that you have is going to share in some perspectives that, you know, just affecting your policies is not enough. It's an opportunity because there are some jurisdictions that have policies that make it harder for, and I know people don't like to talk about this word, but for sometimes anyway, for residential development. But what we're talking about is, when we're talking about housing, whether you're talking about rentals or whether you're talking about home ownership, it's residential development. There's no other way around the terminology. That's what it is. So taking a look at how your residential development policies impact this challenge. And they mentioned, just by way of example, I see your hand, I'll get the chair to recognize you. But one of the things they say, for example, is, one of the counties in their initiative, they looked at foregoing, for the purpose of affordable housing, this specific project, they didn't charge their permitting fees, just as an example. And so that was the way that the county, in this particular context, said we were going to affect affordable housing for this development. We didn't charge our permitting fees on the development. So you're all raising good points. There's another area that talked about the housing allowance, right? The gap, because they talk about if you go back and you look at the history of the problem, they talk about it was a point in time in history where what happened with the affordable housing concern is that you had the income levels were rising overall. They talk about the disproportionate impact, so that's never going to go away because they talk about that. But income levels were rising. The stock of inventory was at a reasonable level, and you also had inflationary pressures that were moderate or affordable. But what's happened over time is you've had the stock of inventory is less. You have inflationary pressures that are more substantial than incomes. The incomes have not kept up with inflation. And then you have the historical disproportionate impact of low-income individuals who that just gets exacerbated. So they talked about, in order to affect it as a whole, you have to consider all of those components. And that's what you all are saying. I'm just voicing it out so that people that are not familiar can hear what we're trying to talk about. So on some level, you have to be able to affect the fact that I still only make $30,000. The inflation is the rent and the mortgage rates are more than I can afford with my $30,000. So something has to happen with my income that helps me afford. And that's what you were talking about, maybe some sort of subsidy, maybe some sort of allowance. But again, these are all components that you as policymakers certainly will be considering, and I'm glad that you're having this very open conversation. Madam Chair?
Thank you. Okay, ACA Jensen, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think many of you know affordable housing is something that's near and dear to my heart. My undergraduate degree is in real estate development, and this is a topic I have followed for many years. I've actually built affordable housing when I was in the private sector. Two facts I want you to make you aware of, and first a shameless plug for the upcoming comp plan. We're going to be doing the comprehensive plan at the end of this year, start that process. And in that process, we're going to be talking about housing. That's going to be one of the very large topics, and we hope to bring in some experts to help us understand that. Two things. Since 1980, the average or the median square footage of a home has gone up 150%. And then in addition to that, the cost per square foot has gone up substantially. And so we have two factors. We have the units that are being built are much larger than they were just from when I was a kid, which drives up the cost. And what it also does, it reduces the number of units being constructed. And so we have two issues. We have an issue of not enough units being constructed, and we have the units being substantially bigger than they were before. And so these two factors are driving up home costs, and they're driving up the number of units being built. And supply and demand is one of the largest factors in housing affordability. During the 2012, 2010, when we were in the recession, housing costs went down in many areas, simply because there was not a demand. Folks were moving back in with their families, with their parents in their basements, and so costs actually went down. And then as soon as those folks started moving out and started having children and so forth, the cost went back up because the supply went down and the demand went up. So those are things that we're going to do. So I just want to make sure you know, we are very aware, we are thinking about this, and we will have that information for you when we get to the comp plan discussion.
Thank you, ACA Jensen. I think several councilors have provided feedback for Administrator Brown to really move forward with some things that we need to see now. I know the comp plan is coming later. I think that's good, but there's some direction we can take now, but then also continue to evaluate this, whether it be through a separate ad hoc committee as we continue to look at additional details about this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with that being the case, we're at time for a break. So please take a moment, get up, move around, get some refreshments if you need so. And when you come back from the break, we'll move into the dashboard portion of our agenda. Thank you. forum, we thought they need to be included. So when you take a look at pages related to the documents, the department updates, so from pages 145 to 195, you will see three briefing documents in there. A couple of those briefing documents are about capital projects that you've heard before, just kind of making sure that that stays on your mind, that you stay abreast of that, give you good feedback on that. You'll hear more about those in the future. And then there's a project in there that we completed with utility bond funds that the county provided a few years ago. You heard me talk about that yesterday as a part of the state of the county. So the details of that information are provided in your brief, in your packet. So those are just departmental updates for your perusal. But now we're going to move to our transparency dashboard, and we're going to have a presentation, and I'm going to actually have Ms. Darlene Gathers come forward. You heard from her on yesterday. She's going to introduce this next part of our agenda for us. Ms. Gathers.
Good morning, everyone. On yesterday, we talked about our strategic plan and the goals, objectives, and initiatives that we have worked together in order to devise. We have Ms. Megan Broadman Bishop. She is with Invisio Solutions. She's the person, along with a couple of other individuals that we partnered with in order to develop what we currently have that you're reviewing. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Megan Broadman Bishop and allow her to do the presentation of our dashboard as well as the PowerPoint presentation.
Wonderful.
Sorry.
Thanks so much,
Just a minute,
Darlene.
Megan. Megan, just 1 minute. 1 minute, please. For everybody in the room, it is the large booklet that was passed out with our packet that listed all of the goals and initiatives. Okay? So that is what we're referencing today. We talked about it yesterday and kind of how we needed to consolidate and match. So now we're going to go back today to discuss the visual piece that goes along with that. So happy to share with anybody who maybe forgot theirs today. Okay.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
There is no particular page. This entire document encompasses all of our 6 goals and initiatives. And then Megan will walk through what visually the dashboard will look like as it relates to these goals and initiatives. Okay.
Okay, so I think with that, we'll dive in. So thank you all for having us back to join your strategic planning retreat. I was here way back in August for another council meeting, so nice to be back again. And I'm really just excited to share all of the hard work that has been accomplished over the last 3 months and to showcase the output of all the work that's been put in. So just looking back quickly, this should be familiar to you, but I did want to start off with just a quick reminder of the goals that we set at the beginning of this process. So first of all, we worked with departments to define meaningful performance measures that tell the story of progress towards your strategic plan. We specifically focused on designing outcome measures that effectively track progress towards the 6 goals you've identified. Second, we did also take some time to focus on operationalizing and refining your strategic plan to ensure that your initiatives are smart and clearly defined with owners, timelines, and key milestones. So our end goal here was for Richland County to have a plan with linked performance measures that is ready to be tracked and updated in Invisio, so you can really start to communicate your progress effectively. And exciting to note here, we are just about there and ready to kind of launch that. So to support Richland County in achieving these goals, we facilitated 3 main phases of work. Phase 1 defined was all about setting the context. So at that point, we worked with Richland County to better understand any existing performance measures that are being tracked and flushed out details related to the schedule and next steps. In phase 2, the design phase, this was where the bulk of the work took place. We worked with departments through a series of 4 workshops to design performance measures and develop an operational plan. And then finally, in phase 3, we built out all the performance measures in Invisio, and pending approval by council, we will be building out all the operational plan details as well, so they are ready to be shared and can start being updated. So with that quick overview, let's get into the exciting piece here and just start talking about the key performance indicators that have been developed. So what I'll do today is just go over a quick summary of the key indicators that have been identified for each goal. I'll also pull out a couple of initial highlights of the progress you're already making, and then I'll transition and show you a preview of your public dashboard. So goal 1, foster good government, is really focused on the execution and delivery of the strategic plan. So a lot of the work that we've actually done over the past 4 months has really contributed to moving this goal forward and ensuring that you are set up for success. So the KPIs for goal 1 here are focused on the strategic plan, tracking the overall progress and status of your plan to better understand whether you are fostering good government. So you can see a couple examples of the visual here that will be linked to your public dashboard. Invest in economic development is really focused on creating more jobs and shopping opportunities through sustainable growth. So you'll see here that the KPIs identified reflect both of these objectives. The majority are focused on understanding their progress towards enhancing economic opportunities, such as trends in annual business license revenue, wages, and number of jobs created. The team also identified the number of acres of county land managed for conservation as an important indicator to track here. So if we do take a quick look at the visuals, we can see that the overall annual business license revenue is actually up almost 12% from the fiscal year 2018-19. And you can see in particular that the last 2 years have been strong years for economic development in Richland County. We can also see that the acres of county land managed for conservation increased in the previous fiscal year, showing a commitment to sustainable growth. So when defining measures to communicate fiscal responsibility, the focus was really on what would be most important for residents of Richland County to see. So this included indicators such as the tax implication of millage rate changes, as they have a direct impact on local businesses and residents. Key indicators related to budgeting were also identified, such as comparing the actual versus budgeted expenditures and revenues and the general fund balance. As you can see in the visual on the screen right now, Richland County's actual expenditures have consistently been slightly below their budget for the past 2 fiscal years, affirming that money is being allocated and expended responsibly. We can also see here that indicators such as external state grants have increased significantly over the past 2 years, ensure that you are accessing diversified revenue streams to fund work in the community. For goal 4, this is really a multifaceted goal that includes elements related to smart growth, utilities, facilities, and affordable housing. So this is really a big goal to track. Indicators to communicate progress on this goal are focused on services such as sewer, water, and transportation being provided equitably, specifically narrowing in on the availability of these services for persons living with low to moderate incomes. So as you can see here, 97.1% of LMI homes are currently being served by sewer and water. I would like to note here that for indicators such as roads and utilities capacity, facility conditions, and housing study data, the data collection is actually still in progress. So you won't see these particular measures on the dashboard yet, but they will be added once that data is available. Indicators for achieving positive public engagement sought to better understand the reach and impact of communication efforts. So we were looking at ways to track the number of community events as well as overall participation. More broadly here, a goal that was referenced by most participants in the process was to conduct a community survey to gain a better understanding of how residents perceive the services provided by Richland County. Again, here, a larger bucket of indicators related to social media engagement. So this included metrics such as followers and reach on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So as we can see here, the overall reach of Instagram content is growing alongside many of the other platforms that Richland is using to communicate. We can also see that indicators such as the number of service requests being directed to the Ombudsman office are increasing. We've just provided a summary here, but more detailed information on the types of requests will be available on the dashboard. So finally here for goal 6, establish operational excellence. This goal was really focused on internal metrics related to training, employee satisfaction, and demographics of the workforce at Richland County. So indicators to track the diversity of the workforce include age, race, and gender, As with some other goals, work is still being done here to refine a process to track employee satisfaction, so stay tuned for future updates related to that particular indicator. Another key indicator was employee training and participation. And so you can see here that the overall number of courses in 2023 increased by more than 50%, and even more significant, overall course attendance increased by 62%. So this is really a good indicator of employees in Richland County having access to many employee development opportunities. So with that overview, probably the part that you're most excited for, I do want to show you a quick look at the public dashboard that has been created. It's important to note here that this is just a preview of your public dashboard. It has not yet actually been published, as we still have a couple more updates to make. And once the revised initiatives have been approved, it will be ready to go live. So I will go over those next steps and timeline to launch shortly. But for right now, I'm going to flip over here. So this is the public dashboard that you as council members, staff, and also residents of Richland County will be able to visit to see progress and updates related to the strategic plan. So this is your landing page or your home page here. We have a quick introductory section. If I scroll down just a little bit here, we can see the overall status and progress of your plan. This will get updated once a quarter as staff go in and put in their updates. So as you come back and look at this, you'll see the progress bar changing as progress is made. If we scroll down just a little bit further here, you can see the 6 goals of the strategic plan. So foster good government, invest in economic development, and all of the other ones here. And what's great about the public dashboard is that it's really interactive, and it allows residents to drill down into the areas that they're particularly interested in learning more about. So for example, if I was interested in invest in economic development, I can actually click on this here and learn a little bit more about this goal. So if I open this up, I'm brought to the next page here, so I can actually see all of those measures and that data that I was just talking about, the data that's been defined by the staff working on these goals. So things like acres of county land managed for conservation, business license revenue, we can see jobs created. And as we keep scrolling down here, we can see all these metrics. And then we can also dig a little bit further into the plan. So here I can also take a look at each specific objective that's been identified for that particular goal. And then if I actually click into, for example, maybe I want to know what initiatives you're taking to create high-paying jobs, I can click in here and actually get a look at each individual initiative, the status, and progress. So this is really, really great for transparently communicating progress to your community. As just another quick example here, let's say we were interested in fiscal responsibility. Here we can take a look at all of the indicators associated with this particular goal. So your general fund information about accommodation taxes, millage rates, which might be particularly important to residents, as well as your external federal and state grant values. I will note here that, through our work over the past several months, one of our main goals was refining and narrowing in on a set of 5 to 10 key indicators for each goal. And the purpose of that is really to ensure that the data being communicated is meaningful and not lost in a sea of other indicators. So as residents, as council members, as staff members, this allows you to just really quickly come take a look, identify progress, see successes, and better understand the work that Richland County is doing. So as with the previous goal, they again can click into different areas, they can see the specific actions, the status. So this really gives a transparent look into your strategic plan. So with that, I just want to take a quick moment to look at the next steps and the path to launch your public dashboard. So we are currently in the process of scheduling training that will enable staff to start updating their indicators in Invisio for February so they can keep the data relevant and up to date. Next, we are planning for a soft launch of the public dashboard in March to internal stakeholders. So at that point, you'll be able to take a closer look at the final public dashboard. Our goal is to have the initiatives finalized and approved by the end of March, which will then be followed by additional training for staff on how to submit updates. So this will really set you up to collect your first round of updates towards your renewed strategic plan in April, followed by the official launch of your public dashboard. I just want to take a moment here to congratulate and thank all the staff who participated in this process. You really are well on the way to launching your public dashboard. And this dashboard that's going to combine data, visuals, and qualitative progress updates will enable you to better tell your story to your community, build trust, and keep external stakeholders informed on your progress and priorities. So we are really excited to see all your hard work come to life as you start to more transparently communicate with your community. So with that, I will pause there and just see if there were any particular questions that folks had.
Thank you so much, Megan. Any questions, comments?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I think it's fantastic to be able to access this information.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. All right, Ms. Gaithers?
If we have no other questions, I'd like to say thank you to Megan. She's done a wonderful job working with us. We have a question. Hold on.
Megan, this is Lori Thomas. Could you please email us that presentation so that I can make sure that we can distribute that to council as well?
Absolutely, I will send it as soon as I pop off today.
Thank you.
Again, thank you to Megan. She's done a wonderful job working with us and partnering with us on this project. And we want to ensure that we keep these lines of communication open so that we can deliver the product in a fashion that's well received.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
ACA Thomas, just, this wasn't for Megan, for just clarification. Can you give council a timeline on when staff expects this to go live?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, as we said yesterday, if the initiatives are approved in February, we would be a little ahead of the game. We do have planning or training for the end users that will start. We would be able to turn it on with the data once we have the updated initiatives. They would have to load those on, so within a couple of days of that happening, the initial dashboard could be turned on to be visible. Your training for your end users does have to take place because up until now, staff has been providing data to Invisio and they've been updating it. These will be held and owned by our internal staff. Once we get those trained, that training complete, we may be able to add a few more as well. It can be operating in the background, but your first updates that you would see with the live platform where you could actually say it's launched and being updated would be with that April timeframe after the end of the first quarter.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you. So we're going to move on now to the financial and budgetary update. We're going to have our Director of Finance, Stacey Ham, come forward to present this part of our agenda.
Get down lower again here. Short people here. Let's see. Wait for them to get that up and running here. All right, here we go. All right, so we're starting out with kind of the fund balance that we have. This is the 5-year of the fund balance. The current year is not finalized yet, so the numbers here might change a little bit, but they won't change a whole lot. So the first part is the general fund that we're used to. We got the non-spendable, which is our inventory, the committed, that is restricted, and then the assigned that has been is also restricted. So you can see the assigned has gone up a little bit. That's part of that 3.5 mils that we're setting aside for capital. So that's why that has grown the last couple of years, because we're setting aside that money for capital expenditures. And the unassigned, that's what is, I guess, spendable that we can use. We try to keep it at around 25%, and that's where we are now. You can see it went up maybe a little bit. It might not go quite up that much, just kind of when it finally shakes out. But, so the unassigned is, right at that 25. The policy's 20 to 30, but we know we want to keep it around the 25 to be able to keep our AAA rating. That's really helps with our AAA rating to actually have it at 25 and not go below, because if they see it going down, then that might change the actual rating. We have some of the other special revenues. We got fire that went up some. Most of them went up a little bit, all of them. Hospitality went up about 1.5 million. We have the transportation, and then two below the transportation is actually the mitigation credits. So that shows the $6 million that we've made back from the mitigation sales. So that's also allowable for the transportation expenditures. So together, that's about $273 million that we're holding to do all the projects, of which I think all but 50,000 is in budgeted for projects already. So most of all that is already budgeted, and a good bit's encumbered because they're working on a lot of those different projects now. Solid waste deficit is going down, so that's helping because we're actually paying our current expenditures, so it's not growing anymore, because we weren't, not making enough to cover all our expenditures in the past. And Broad River has continually to go up some, which is helping with their future expansions and all to have the money and to have the reserves for that. So that's the fund balance. Any questions on that? Or go to the next one. This is our debt limit. You can see.
Councilman Weaver?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, late on my question here. So, with interest rates going up in the banks, I'm assuming that these funds are held in some kind of interest-bearing account if
Yes.
state law allows that?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
where does the interest show on here that we're earning?
The interest you'll see a little bit later when Lori goes over some of that.
Okay.
Right now, currently, we have already made $2 million more than what we've budgeted in interest.
I would think so.
Most
Good.
of the interest, some of the interest is in the individual projects, but like the general fund money, all the interest goes to the general fund. So like currently, right now, you'll see other revenue is very high, and part of it, it's just, we're through November and we're already $2 million ahead of budget.
Okay.
So, and we were ahead last year in the budget, so it
Okay,
kind of
and
helps
And
that
Ms.
we've
Thomas
been-
will speak to that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good, thank you.
And that's all handled through the treasurer's office. They're the ones that do the investment. Okay. So on our debt limit, you can see we are currently up to 89% because we did the large investment, large bond issue that we did recently for working on the family center. And so it's a little bit higher than we've had in the past. We've been, up 50, 60% before. It leaves us just a little bit right now for anything that kind of pops up. We will be having assessments are going up. We're having reassessment years, so that will go up as the assessment goes up because it's a percentage of our assessed value that we're allowed to borrow against to get the 8%. Some more questions on that? All right. So this actually shows all our outstanding debt. You can see it will also go up as these couple of them are
Ms.
rolling
Ham.
off.
Ms. Ham, over
Yeah.
here.
Ms.
Other
Newton,
court-
you're recognized.
Thank you. I'm sorry, quick question. How often do we do the reassessment?
Every 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
It was a fast 5 years.
I know, it was. So several of these will roll off. As that debt rolls off, that also allows more 8% debt, so that will grow, so we aren't too concerned about being up at the 89%. We got several dropping off. We got the hospitality that will be dropping off in 26. So that's just what we currently have outstanding in all our debt. Next up. On the collections, you can see we are doing well in collections. The first number, total tax bills, is everybody's tax. That's the full millage for everything. So that includes the schools, the agencies, the county. So the overall collections are up a little bit. Some millages went up a little bit, as we know that. Some of the schools went up some, but most of the millages, we really didn't increase a lot of millage. But so it looks like in collections are up about $9 million. So that's looks good. The fee and lieu collections are up a little bit. That just probably means some of them have paid already. These collections are only through November. The bulk of the taxes come in December and January with the January 15th deadline. So a lot of the overall collections haven't, come in at this point, but now they are since it's January. But those numbers aren't done. Those are handled through the treasurer's office. Now, the general fund itself, and we know we didn't increase the millage on the general fund, and we still have a little bit more money. So that means the collections, we have more bills and more collections that are coming in. Local option sales tax, it is up a little bit, only about 600,000. So that means we're really only bringing in about, looking at each month, we're only bringing about 100,000 more than we did in the prior year for each of the months. So I think the local option is kind of leveling off right now. In the past, we've been bringing in like an extra 300,000 a month. So the last 2 years, each year it's gone up about a little over 4 million to 4.5 million. But I don't think this year's, we'll probably be lucky to be $1 million more than we brought in last year. I think it's really kind of leveled off at this point with our, with the sales tax. But just looking at the way that the trends are looking for each of the months, it looks like about 100,000, so maybe around $1 million, $1.2 million by the end of the year. So that's kind of leveled off. And then now we have Lori's going to go over the revenue and expenditures.
Thank you, Stacy. I want to point out a couple of things about local option sales tax for those of you who aren't familiar with it. By ordinance, our local option sales tax is 100% credited against property taxes. So for every tax bill that's issued, a portion of our sales tax or a factor of our sales tax, which is determined by the auditor's office, is issued against that. What may be seen as we start to see that level off is that taxpayers may think, if it doesn't grow as quickly as it has, taxpayers may think they're paying a little more in taxes if it ever declines to below the prior year, but that's not the fact. What the fact is that the local option sales tax that we're collecting may be going down because we can't issue more of a sales tax credit than we're collecting. Those are transverse, so we collect the revenue in 1 year, reserve the portion that was not applied in that year, so that's part of that assigned fund balance. We can't spend that. So we reserve the rest of that in case the following year we have to make up that difference. So if there's any questions on that, please let me know. I will be happy to refer you to the auditor because I'm still wrapping my head around local option sales tax. Okay. As you can see here, looking at the fiscal year to date for 24, the first column is our budget, the second column is our actual. Revenues, you're only going to see posted through November because we do not post our own revenues. The Treasurer's Office posts 90% of our revenues. They do not close their books until the 25th day of the month after the close. So we don't have it all back to ourselves and balanced. You'll see a 2-month lag in that with the county reporting simply because of the time that it takes them to close their books. So when you look at this today, you're going to be looking at July through November when it comes to revenues, July through December because we do pay all of those ourselves in expenditures. Okay? So we had collected 33%. I will point out that property taxes and business license, which are two of the largest sources of income, have not, when you're seeing these revenues, had not come due yet, or most of them had not come due yet. Also, I will say in your intergovernmental, you've only got 1 quarter there, whereas you would think that you would see 2 if you were through December because you only receive your checks from the state once a quarter. If we can go to the next slide, please. So in your 5-year, in your 5-year historical collections, you will see that for fiscal year 24 through November, we're about $20 million ahead of where we were at this time last year. There are a couple of things that I'll point out. One is interest to your point, Mr. Weaver, in other revenues. The other is in your transfers in. Keep in mind that we took in $4 million from the ARPA dollars and $3 million from the public safety dollars that were set aside for pay, and we've already I've made those adjustments here. That's a lot of it, but if you look at your line items there, your property tax and the other taxes are up. So everything is showing an appropriate trend up, with the exception of charges for services, which is pretty much on schedule. At the bottom of that same slide, you're going to see a trend line there. So if you look at the trend line that I've built into the graph, you will see we're actually trending above where we have for the last 5 years currently with our collections. Any questions before I move on? Okay, we can move on. Yes, sir.
Ms. Thomas, I had more of a comment than a question, but, and I don't have this ready for my fellow council folks here yet, but I did ask the treasurer to put together a report on delinquent property taxes, and it was pretty high. It was about $12.5 million. She just sent it to me Tuesday night. But the point is, we might want to add delinquent property taxes to this next report, the next go-around, to see whether it's up, down. I just think that's an interesting thing to watch, because the number of properties is surprisingly high. And I'm going to meet with the treasurer again when I get back about what we're doing about that. But, you know, the economy's been pretty good. And so if we have that much delinquent property taxes, $12 million, what is it going to be when we hit a recession? So that may be something that y'all want to add to the report, you know, based on her figures.
Yes, sir. I can talk with the treasurer about whether that's a possibility.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, going over the 5-year historical, the year-to-date expenditures on your next page. You will see that we are at 40.4% through December. We were at 50% through the year, so we are at about 9% below the average. And keep in mind that there are many of these expenditures that are annual expenditures that have already hit. And keep in mind also that we did implement the salary study a month ahead of schedule. So as we can see, we are well within budget. We don't anticipate that we'll have any problems, barring any unforeseen circumstances. So 40%, as you can see, the general government is at 36.2. Public safety is at 46.1. There has been a lot of overtime in that, and there are a lot of expenditures in public safety that happen at the beginning of the fiscal year. Public works is about 43%. Health and social services is 55%. This is driven particularly by some pass-through expenditures that come into us that are driven also by pass-through revenues. So that it's not something that we're really concerned about, and it's really only 5% over. And then transfers out are at 17%. That's not unusual, because these are requests from agencies, and they do have to have the backup to be able to request those transfers out. Any questions? Moving to the next slide, which is historical collections as of November 30th. I'm sorry, this would be your expenditures. I've mislabeled this. I apologize. Your historical expenditures through this would be through December the 31st. As you can see, we're down about $2 million over prior year, and that's including the implementation of the salary study. I'll say that our staff is we've really been hitting home to all of our staff that we have to be good stewards of county money. Not that they weren't in the past. We had lots of other resources at the time, but they are very cognizant of the funding that they're spending, and they're being very methodical and very thoughtful about where we're allocating our resources. So kudos to our staff for helping us to be able to do these things. As Mr. Brown has said previously, one of the things that we want people to understand is if we're better capable of managing the county's resources, we're better able to allocate those resources to other places, to the community, and also to the employees to ensure that they continue to be compensated at a fair rate. If you look at the trend numbers there, we are slightly below where the past 5-year trend would be on expenditures. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, the category of health and social services, what does that include? Is that the insurance or what else?
No, ma'am, that is actually, Stacy, help me that with this, what that's called, what's that called?
That's for the indigent,
Indigent care.
Care.
Indigent care.
Indigent care, which is basically a pass-through.
Yes.
From the state to us that then we pay.
Then we pay it to Prisma.
Well, PRISA pays us and we pay the state.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. On page 253 of your book, if I can refer you to that, I want to sort of go over some things that you're going to start to see coming out of budget and finance.
Can you state that page number? again?
Page, I'm sorry, 259, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. It's backwards for me. 253.
Okay. Thank you.
You don't have to. You couldn't see it anyway if you did. I'm asking Angela not to put it up because it's very busy. This is a report that you will start getting monthly from the administrator that references our position compared to budget. The first will be a general overview of what we've projected to collect, what our revenue sources are, defines those things for you, gives you an actual year-to-date for revenue collections. Is everybody found that? Okay. It defines what your largest revenue sources are, tells you where those come from. It will give you a historical collections and then the fiscal year collections as to where we are compared to the same time the prior year. That's on page 257. On page 258, we'll do the reverse with expenditures. And we'll provide you budget to actual, 5-year historical, and then a trending chart. If there's anything that we feel like is unusual or that we've found to be something that we think needs to be pointed out, we will also reference that in our in that entire section that you just went through. Then the next pages following that are both the revenues first and then the expenditures for the county by department and by account. Any of those that have an orange out there, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's above the percentage of the year that has passed. But like I said, that's not really unusual in many instances. For instance, your memberships and dues. Your memberships are typically paid at the beginning of the fiscal year because all the agencies bill you for those, or all the membership groups bill you for those in June, and we pay those at that time. So you've actually paid the entire year's expenditure. I've tried to go through and mark, or you'll also see comments that will be very general. But what I will also say to you is our offices, both finance, budget, and the administrative office, are available to walk any member through this at any point in time. And we will also be able to put this information on our website so that our citizens will be able to see that as well.
Madam Chair.
You're recognized, Administrator Brown.
So the purpose of this report, council members, is so that when you get to the end of the budget year and you're talking about looking at the next budget cycle, you're not waiting to have a budget conversation 3 months out of the year. You have the ability to ongoingly understand what's happening in the county from a financial perspective. And again, we'll try to also target any big county initiatives so that historically you can take a look at why did the county make a step then. You can look at these reports and we have a historical marker that will help transcend some of our individual council members who may have history or staff members who have history. You have a documented report that will allow you to keep up with that. So I know it'll be a lot of new information for you, but the idea is to continue to equip you with resources to help you stay abreast as often as you want to. Thank you.
ACA Thomas, can
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
I guess maybe, like you said, the orange is an alert, but would there ever be any other colors that you would use?
I don't anticipate at this time. If you prefer a different color, though, you can certainly let me know. I just thought red was a little.
Red is a little, much. Orange, not my favorite color. But
Well, then maybe we go with garnet.
I just wanted to make sure if we got it one month that there wasn't a legend. But basically, if there's anything we need to look at, it'll be in orange and it'll have notes.
Right. And you're going to see some big swings once January is posted. Now, keep in mind that the next report that you'll receive will be expenditures through January. You'll receive this probably at your second meeting in February. Your expenditures will be through January, but your revenues will only be through December. So don't expect to see that property tax number tick up extensively until that January number, until we get January, which you won't see until March. Any?
Councilwoman Teresa?
Just want to say that at this table, we're all tickled about the marriage license line.
Probate's been busy. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you, A.C. Thomas.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Darlene Gathers to come back up, and she's going to walk us through hospitality and accommodations tax. And following that, Sarah Harris will come up and talk to you about CDGB and grant funding.
Okay, this particular slide was.
Ms. Gaithers, I'm sorry. Can you tell us what page?
I apologize. Okay. 214 in my booklet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on this particular slide, it has 4 separate items that are on this slide. In the upper left corner, it's giving the budget versus actuals, a 5-year purview of budget versus actuals for hospitality tax revenue and the expenditures to the immediate right of that. You will see that there was a significant amount of revenue that was collected in fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23, and that has been carried forward, as well as you'll see the expenditures, budgets versus actuals. Now, there was a large percentage that was budgeted in fiscal year 19-20. However, the expenditures were significantly lower than the budgeted amount. We'll move down, same slide. We'll move down to the accommodations tax and revenue. In fiscal year 19-20, we had budgeted for $560,000, but the actuals came in lower in the revenue section. And then we carried forward those expenses that exceeded the budget. And so in fiscal year 21-22, there was a lower allocation budgeted for accommodations tax. And so we're pretty much in alignment right now with our accommodations tax. Over on the right-hand side, far right, with the current balances for each district, that is reflective of the council approval for allocations that is given every year. And then there is a council approval for carry forwards for those allocations. So if a particular council member didn't use the funding in prior years, it has rolled over into these balances. And then in the far right bottom, we have our ARPA actuals. The revenue that we have in deferred revenue currently is the balance of the $80,771,000 versus the expenditures of the $30 million through December the 31st. Any questions on this slide?
Ms. Gaithers, that not a question, but more so just a comment for my colleagues, if possible consideration to talk about at future upcoming meetings. But looking at especially with our individual districts, maybe if we consider a cap on the rollover amounts, because some of that money could be used back into the larger general fund, or to award other grants. So would love to have conversations if anybody had any thoughts about it, one way or the other. I couldn't hear you. Oh, okay, you want to tell me later what y'all discussed? Thank you, Ms. Gaithers.
You're welcome. The next slide that we have is a 5-year overview of our ordinance agencies, special promotion agencies, and Tier 3 agencies. As you can see, these fundings are allocations that have been given through the committee as well as council allocations. And so this is the 5-year total for each one of these organizations. However, we've been awarding some of these agencies as far back as I could see in 2010. So significant amounts of funding have been going to some of these agencies. Any questions on this slide? Next slide. This particular slide gives the top 10 agencies that we have been providing allocations to over a 5-year period. And we've given the 5-year total with the highest level of funding to a particular organization.
One question, looking at that number, does this reflect all hospitality contributions, meaning from the committee, from council members, from the budget process altogether?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. And I'll just say that's really helpful because with a lot of these organizations, something that's challenging for me is they can be getting funding from so many different pots. And so you think you're making a funding decision, taking into account everything, but there may be, a missing piece of information somewhere. So thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
On here, it says college. And that's it. It's on it's probably like maybe the 6th or 7th one from the bottom.
Okay.
What college?
Okay, I would have to delve into getting your response for that. That's a typo. It says college on the, so I'll definitely give you a response on that. I apologize. All right, accommodations, tax allocations. Again, these are the top 10 agencies by fiscal year with a 5-year total, giving the information from the highest level of funding cumulatively. And with accommodations tax, this is a committee decision only. Yes, ma'am.
So with the accommodation tax allocation, this is based on discretionary grants submitted to the county, and there's accommodations committee that determines this, and then full council votes.
That's
Just for
correct.
explanation. Okay, thank you.
All right, these are the fiscal year 24 Community Impact Grants Awards that are currently in progress. As of December the 31st, we've reimbursed about $415,000 of these this funding. And currently, you can move on to the next slide for this one. Currently, we have the fiscal year 2025 Community Impact Grants underway. The applications were sent out as of January the 1st. There is a final deadline of February the 4th, and based on a request from Madam Chair, I researched, and there is one complete application currently. There are 49 incomplete applications. In our listserv, it reaches out to approximately 200 organizations, and we have sent out the initial notice on January the 1st. A reminder notice went out to them on January the 14th, and another reminder will go out to them again on Monday, January the 29th. Any questions?
So, of these applications that are complete, this is the same group of individuals where it is our organizations that our priority organizations are included here, as well as anyone else who would like to apply. So the numbers that you gave, the 1 complete and the 49 incomplete, would be inclusive of the 9 and anyone else?
Yes.
Interesting.
And I will say, just for, I guess, previous knowledge, last year when we did this, it was really similar. We had a lot of people start applications, and it really wasn't until, maybe 3 or 4 days before the deadline that they actually completed it. So they're able to start it and then come back to it and continue to work on it. And so that's a lot of what we saw last year as well.
To add on, as a caveat to that, I can say that when we went through the SIG workshops, we did advise them to try and get their applications in before the final day, because everyone entering their applications on the last day will cause the system to crash, and we don't want that to occur. And then we do not receive paper applications, so we want them to try and get it in as soon as possible. Yes, ma'am.
So this is a projection contingent on what happens February the 4th that
Yes,
we're
ma'am.
having now.
That's correct.
I would just like to make a comment. Once these programs are available and we decide which ones we fund, Mr. Brown, it would be nice to have an opportunity or have a process where we can know the services that are being offered, and also be able to refer our constituents to these services where possible. Currently, there's no way to know what services are being offered and how we're able to help constituents receive the services.
Yes, ma'am. I think the information this time around includes the provider potentially providing that information, and then we'll have an opportunity to publicize that information utilizing our platforms. Thank you.
And I would like to, if there's some type of systematic way that we could, our clearinghouse that we could use, such as the Richland County Library, the Social Services Department that they have, to that at least council members can make referrals when we have constituents that are in need of services and we don't know where to go. And I'll be glad to discuss that further.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And if we don't already have this on our idea wish list design for our website, just to highlight somehow these services for our constituents, so that when they go to richlandcountysc.gov, they can navigate to other resources from there.
Now, I do believe this information is on the website currently, so.
Thank you. As someone who stands at neighborhood meetings sometimes with my phone or my iPad out and pulls up our website to try to point
Navigate.
people where to go, sometimes the two of us are clicking around links and trying to figure out, well, does this work on, what does this look like on my mobile versus my desktop, and all the rest of it. So, yes.
Councilwoman Terratio, luckily that website is a capital project that is going to happen very soon. It is a priority.
Yes. Any other questions? All right, that concludes this section. Thank you.
Thank you. A.C.A. Thomas?
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, do you have some slides, or are we just going to refer to a page?
I do have some slides, but I don't know if are they ready? Yeah, I did have some slides.
Well, we can turn to, what page are you starting with in the book?
275.
All right, we'll turn there.
So I can walk you through those slides. That's okay. A few things I told myself this morning was, don't trip, breathe when speaking in public, because I'm very nervous speaking in front of groups. And also, get your point across with these grants, because we have a lot going on here at Richland County. Okay. All right. So with this slide, it's on page 276, but I titled it Grants Administration for All. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather, so you might hear my voice cracking a bit. So my department is more commonly known for our HUD CDBG grants, which is from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grants. Well, I wanted to give you a little purview and insight into other grants that we do monitor here at the county and grants that I've applied for in this last year. So we actually have a grant that's pretty new to the county through South Carolina Department of Veterans Affairs. We worked with our partners at Fort Jackson and McEntire Air Force Base. And for me, as a former Department of Defense contractor, it was a really proud moment. I have been able to circle back with some old colleagues from 20 years ago to work on these grants. So the total amount really within this year for these grants is, let's see here, $432,190 for our McEntire Air Force Base project, and that specifically is to help our temporary firefighter assistance housing. Our second grant that we were awarded was for $1,145,466.53, and this is in collaboration with our nonprofit partner to finish the remaining portion of our Centennial Park project at Fort Jackson. So some of you may or may not know, but Fort Jackson is one of the largest training installations here in the southeast area. I used to work on platform for the U.S. Army, recruiting people in and out every week. So we have hundreds of families coming in every time we have a graduation. So it used to house the recruiting school, which is back at Fort Knox now, but there are thousands of families that travel to visit their soldiers in AIT, to visit their soldiers graduating from basic training. So this facility, it's not really a facility, it's a park that's going to house a lot of opportunity for families to gather together on site. So this is a really awesome opportunity for us to partner with as CDVA. We also have, here a large collaboration effort with other departments. So I work cross-sectionally with a lot of different directors to write grants and to, seek out grants for opportunities. And it poses one challenge for me. I don't have a lot of capacity in terms of human capital. So the hope is that we can grow our department because I have all of my personnel are 100% salaried through HUD. So I am ethically not able to ask them to work on any grants outside of a HUD grant. So we have two general funded positions. I'm a general funded position, and our accountant that we have coming in, we're making an offer very soon, is going to be helping us with all of those diverse moments that we have when it comes to grants administration. So the idea is that that individual is going to be able to work across every single grant that we have with our financial process. So while I monitor a lot of our programmatic conditions and compliance regulatory practices, it's really important that we have an accountant that's also tied to those dollars that are also tied to our programmatic compliance. All right, so, excuse me, I'm a little bit nervous. Okay, so we do have our HUD allocations, which we are an entitlement community. So this year we were awarded about $1.7 million in CDBG funds. We also have a new portion of funding that's going to be for ESG, which is our emergency shelter program. And this is something that is very new to the county. We're excited to have this funding from HUD. We also have our home investment program, and I'll go over a little bit more about our HUD programs a little bit later on, but Across, I've worked with Director Davis, I've worked with Director Maloney. I've had amazing friendships that I've been able to forge in this last year, just trying to understand where our funding streams are coming from. And it's really apparent that the more funding streams we can tap into from the state, from the feds, it helps to lift that burden of our general fund budget. So that's my goal in the next year, is to really help focus with all of our department heads, the areas that produce risk, the areas that we really need help with as a community, and also keeping my ear to the ground and working with our nonprofit partners to really engage with community activities that grow our capacity. All right, so our next slide, please. Okay, so a lot of us in our HUD space, we know what these terms are. But to our community, to our citizens, they may not know what these conditions are with grants. So I would ask if you speak with anyone in the community, they ask about grants, please refer them to us. We're happy to provide technical assistance and information for nonprofits, citizens. And I'm partnered up with a lot of our nonprofit organizations to help provide education for our citizens as well. But HUD grants, they are designed to serve principally low to moderate income households. So as we start looking at the national objectives, this is what my team has to follow. We're required to follow all of these conditions from low to moderate income households, considerations for slum and blight, and considerations for urgent need. So as an example, you could have a disaster that comes in. We also facilitate grants from HUD for those activities. And so what I will say with that particular slide is that our primary objectives are truly to help provide decent housing, suitable living environments, and expand economic opportunity. And we do this through a variety of diverse programs here inside of my department. So let's go on to our next slide. Oh, yes, ma'am.
So to that previous slide, on there, it has slum blight. And with the slum blight, is that a grant that can be, or I guess my question is, who would the proper recipient be to address slum blight? Or is it something that we can actually, as a county, use those funds to address?
That's an awesome question. I very recently have been in communication with Geo Price's department and have been working with Director Zapp to figure out a way how to address slum and blight. One of the critical areas that occurs with our CDBG grants is we have a limited time scale. So in the time that it takes for a county process to locate and identify a property and make sure that all the legalities are taken care of, it can exceed our time. So we're actually working with a few areas internally. It is designed for more internal areas that we identify as a county. But that is an excellent question. We have slum and blight in a lot of areas, and so we are identifying property addresses right now to tackle that problem.
So just as a follow-up, I would just say that, Ms. McBride and I, we've talked about this a lot. And I think that would be something that would be critically important for us to address, especially as we look at our strategic plan, and really making sure that it's one thing for us to beautify 2020 Hampton Street, but it would be great if we could beautify Two Notch Road or Decker Boulevard, some other areas that need a lot of attention and a lot of love. And if we have those funds that are readily available, I sure would like to see the staff figure out how we can internally address those areas right within our community.
Yes, I would love to do that for you both. We are in a place where we have a robust team internally with our HUD grants, and I feel very capable that our team can come up with a plan to tackle this issue. We know that it can extend to houses and communities that have blight. We know that it can extend to businesses that also have blight or rundown businesses. And so we're going to work on that, and we'll provide you some updates in the near future on those discussions, and hopefully to also invite you to those discussions as well. Okay, so here's one of our workflows. So a lot of people ask, how do I qualify for a HUD CDBG grant? Well, In the past, you had to only be a nonprofit. You could only be a nonprofit. But in this last year, we have had some expansion on it to faith-based organizations as well, because we do know in our communities, not only are NPOs providing these services, but many of our churches are hitting these crisis issues head on. So what we've done is we go through an eligibility review. So if you speak with someone in the community, it could be a pastor. Just the other day, I was speaking to a pastor in our community who serves a bilingual population, and I said, please apply for our programs. If you want to send me a name of a nonprofit organization, we will certainly place them on our listserv for the department and inform them when we have a notice of funding for these activities. But the three concentrated areas that we carry out here for the grants department, they address infrastructure. So we have the ability to improve public facility improvements. We can address that slum and blight. Now for public services, this is a little bit more of a broad category, but we assist a lot of NPOs that are tackling issues like crisis intervention, mental illness, public health care. All of these things like homeless prevention, shelter operations, and rapid rehousing, we're addressing in the parameters of HUD grants. Now, knowing sometimes there are so many nuances with federal grants, right? It's so strict, it's so hard for folks to get grants. We are increasing our outreach effort, and in this last year, we really had a lot of more considerations for organizations that were interested in our grants. And that's what we've done is a grassroots effort of getting out there in the community, reaching out to folks, a lot of outreach in terms of having a lot of meetings with department heads, our community, leaders in our community, faith-based organizations. And I will tell you, like, I cannot operate in a silo in grants. I have to have your friendship and your community. And it's really important for us because as we grow our grant programs, knowing what those crisis situations are, they vary from community to community. So we want to increase access, we want to provide equity in our funding sources, and we want to take into consideration the new things that present itself inside of our communities to really grow. We also have housing. So I'm going to show you the next slide because we do offer some home ownership potential possibilities for folks. We help with affordable rental developments, and we do this by working together with our nonprofit partners in that space. So just as an example, we have a nonprofit that we have worked with for several years, but they go into communities where we're looking at folks that are aging in place, right? It's really hard for folks that are in the geriatric ages to leave their home. You know, it's heartbreaking. I get calls all the time, like, I don't want to leave my home, but I have severe problems with my house. How do I fix it? Where do I fix it? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? So in this last year, what's been incredibly important for me is I've connected with the South Carolina Department of Aging Commission. I wanted to learn about what our geriatric units were kind of dealing with, the influx of people, the housing stock, aging in place, and how we could fix these problems. So I'm pleased to say, I'm going to go to the next slide. We are opening up our Operation One Touch program, which is a minor home repair program, and it's going to begin on February 5th. Now, with any grant, I have to work inside of a budget, and we are usually able to assist anywhere from 5 home repairs to 20 home repairs. We start very conservatively because last year the program was not in place because we had a problem with locating qualified contractors. So it's a struggle a lot of communities are facing. We're not isolated in this alone, but this year we're very happy to do this. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this wheel, right? So we've got first come, first serve. Okay, but first come, first serve also means that we have to review eligibility criteria for the folks that are applying for our grants. We can only serve unincorporated Richland County. And what that means is our township centers like Town of Blythewood, City of Columbia, all those other areas, unfortunately, like City of Columbia, our sister community, they receive an apportionment of HUD CDBG funds. So by the federal government standard, we can't work across those jurisdictional lines because it could be a sense of commingling of funds. So it has to be residents in those unincorporated areas. Now, the home has to be the primary resident of the individual living there. They have to have lived in the home for a certain amount of time, and they have to meet the HUD income limits. Now, with that application process, our team evaluates their income levels, and there is a formulary process that HUD has in place for us to determine what those thresholds are. And it varies from individual to individual, and different situations occur as well. But for all of these projects to get kicked off, we have to conduct what's called an environmental review. An environmental review is essentially just determining if the property is safe for us to start breaking ground, okay? And this is done through our field office by HUD in the Southeast region. And for any homes that are before 1979, we do have to conduct a lead inspection. So what I will say, as happy as I am for this program to lift off, there are conditions that sometimes prevent us from moving fast with these grants. And the service line, we have lengthy backlogs of folks that want to get into our programs. But we have a fully capable team that's running the processes through, that's making sure that we do everything on our end to expedite the areas that we can, to lift it off to HUD for final approval. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Oh, questions. Sorry, nervousness.
So this particular program is just for homeowners and not renters?
Just for homeowners, yes, ma'am.
The other, totally how much money is available?
So it can be anywhere from $5,000.
No, totally, the budget.
Oh, the budget for the home improvement program. Let me show you.
And while you're looking at that, how can we ensure that we get the information out to homeowners that oftentimes we don't reach the homeowners that really need it? So is there a new process that you have in place for outreach?
We do. We are going
rather
to...
than the regular emails that we send out, is there any way that we look out and do a grassroots outreach process?
Yes, ma'am. We have been engaged with a lot of door knocking initiatives, so we're really trying to get out there and get the information out. What we do know is that the communities that typically tap into this program are our aging communities. So we've also opened up access to have paper applications. We're looking at those things of the generational gaps, right? For me, you guys can see I brought my laptop. I'm good with my laptop, my cell phone, but I know that when it comes to my dad, he's got to have a piece of paper. He needs to see that paper. So, we're going old school. We're taking it old school because we want to make this more inclusive, and we understand that they're just things that we have to be considerate of. We have an aging population who didn't grow up on Google Suite and Microsoft Suite. They grew up old school, and we got to recognize that. So we have paper applications.
Well, thank you so much for that. And final, I think it's so important that your department and the Community Development Department work closer with council so that we are available other resources and that we can help you with the outreach. And I applaud your efforts so far to expand the outreach and to be more involved with council.
Thank you so much. It means a lot. And I think that, I wear a lot of hats as a grant person, grant director, providing oversight for a lot of different areas. But at the core of it, I think about those things about just practicing the golden rule of treating others how you want to be treated, loving your community, and identifying areas of crisis. Because for me as a social worker, I do put that hat on quite a bit because it makes us think about the intentional ways that we can drive purposeful driven initiatives that really reach the true populations we're trying to serve. And so I've got some pictures that I want to show, but before...
Sarah, I'm sorry, real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a few more questions, but
Okay.
wanted to also add on with Councilwoman McBride's comment about sharing information with council. If there's a way, I know we had talked about, understanding budget before, and we saw a draft report that we start getting monthly. If there's another way that there's something that can be provided to council members in a packet, even if it's a few sample flyers, or here's kind of the monthly update on grant opportunities for you to share so that we can copy and paste and email. if there's something you can think about, a template that maybe could be provided to council members, that would be great. And then also figuring out how to make sure there's a consistent stream of communication coming out of our communications office as well about those same type of opportunities.
I love to do that. And we do have a mechanism, and it's probably just going to be a very simple file where you see all, our budget, what we have, what we've been allocated this year, and the projects that we may have slated in communities. I've worked closely with Councilwoman Shakese Newton recently and Director Davis on a project in her area, and I'd love the opportunity to work with each one of you, because one thing that is not always highlighted with HUD grants, so you can have an area where a nonprofit may be located in, let's say, West Columbia. However, that particular service is driven by some of our citizens here in the county. So it could be that we have citizens that are receiving some type of health care, and that nonprofit is carrying that work out. Certainly what we do for that metric is they have to provide us documentation that that is a unincorporated Richland County resident that they are serving. So that's something, another outreach effort that we're trying to grow in that capacity. And but I would love to provide that information to you all on a regular basis.
Thank you. Ms. Barron, or who was, okay, Ms. Barron, then Weaver.
Thank you. So this is something that I talk a lot about with my constituents, because I do have a large area that has our seniors in it. So I've got a couple of questions, and you might just want to take note of them, and then you can get them back to me. But I think that at the end of the day, we do need to know what is the total amount, because I've already in my head like, okay, we need to have a meeting to talk about this.
Okay.
And then, what is the criteria for an applicant to be considered? And, then the last thing would be, you mentioned you started this portion of the presentation talking about last year, we were unable to do it because we didn't have qualified contractors. So going in, knowing that on February the 5th, we are going to launch this, do we already have these qualified contractors standing in queue, ready to go?
We do. And so before we launched the program, we conducted a lot of preliminary work and engagement, worked with our procurement division as well, and we had a lot of help from other departments to get this kicked off the right way. Last year, I think we were still coming off of the pandemic, but we did do a lot of that preliminary work to make sure that we could go ahead and start with this process right away.
And so one last follow-up question would be, I'm assuming that you did partner with our OBO and making sure that they're on, I would like to see that we're using our small businesses here right in Richland County, as well as that are already on our list of qualified vendors and such. Was that the process that you used, or is small businesses in Richland County a priority for this particular grant process?
Well, for this grant process, we allow everyone to come through. I just recently actually connected with Ms. Patricia yesterday, and we want to partner on some things in the near future. And so I think that in flux with me coming into the county, there used to be a long-standing relationship, but we're working towards those things. So that is the intention, and I'll work with Ms. Patricia. We talked about getting something on record and on the books to meet about the initiatives that they have, but we'll have to work through our budget and what we do have with CDBG. I'm certainly happy to share that information with you once we get those things on record.
I'm not certain that you understand my question.
Okay.
And that is that I understand that, yeah, you guys need to work together, but as far as the contractors that have been identified, how did we identify those contractors?
They actually go through our procurement department for bid.
And so going through the traditional procurement
Yes, ma'am.
process, the small business or the OBO was involved in that process? I'm just curious.
I think I'll defer to Ms. Director Wazinski.
Hi, good morning. Jennifer Ladishkin, Procurement Director. Yes, we did partner with the OSBO office and reached out to all of our registered SLBEs. They were invited to participate in the process. And then the grants department also did have a vendor a training program that vendors had to attend. So the resulting list of vendors came from that outreach and the vendor training program because it was mandatory that they did attend the training. So we did reach out to them. But one thing I would like to also point out is that because this is federal money, we cannot mandate a local business goal. It has to be open to all contractors. So we did do our vendor outreach in that with that regard.
And I'll conclude here. I understand that and I appreciate the process. But I just want to just go on the record to say that anytime, we think business or we think contracts, I just think OBO needs to be involved at any point, in any point of in our decision making, no matter what department. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question about your previous slide on the pie chart there.
Okay.
You've got 5-year lien minimum. What does that mean? Does that mean the homeowner gets a lien on their property and what if they don't pay it back? And
No, it's a lien. Basically, it's required by HUD. We have to place that lien on the property as we are conducting that work. And so, as mentioned before, it could take a considerable amount of time. What we do is we then release the lien after that 5-year period. What we're doing is making sure that if we conduct the repair on the home, like let's just say that we repaired all brand new windows in the home, that the homeowner doesn't sell the home and make a profit off of that. So HUD has these very stringent regulations for that, but that's why those liens come into place.
But let's say in the second year they decide, divorce, have new job, they have to relocate. How do they satisfy that lien?
We don't have the ability to satisfy that lien with HUD per that regulation.
Wow. So if they sign up for this, they got to know that
They
they got to
do.
stay there 5 years.
And we make that very clear to all of our applicants, but
Wow.
but for the most part, what happens is because these are most of the property owners that come to us, this has been their home that they lived and grew up in. And so that is the majority of the population that we are reaching out to. And this is just a federal requirement that I'm beholden to, and I wish it could be a little bit different, a little bit more lenient to consider those areas, but unfortunately.
What if they expire prior to the end of the 5 years? But the family is just a lien on the property, they can't sell it?
At that point, that would be a different consideration.
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
so
Mhm.
the estate can
Yes,
sell
sir.
it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Newton?
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. A compliment and a request, well, two compliments. So one is I really would just like to acknowledge our grants department because they have completely modeled the kind of collaboration that we want to see where we had these CDBG funds. They went to the departments and said, hey, what's on your list? What can we do? And it just so happens that one of the projects that they found was for a really deserving neighborhood in my district, but they have been putting out flyers, talking to the neighborhood association presidents, knocking on doors, talking to the church leaders, and doing everything that they can do, and really just kind of going above and beyond at some pretty spicy meetings to help out. So I appreciate that. I'd also like to compliment our PIO office on the work that they've been doing to promote grants and grant opportunities. So those are my compliments. And then my request is, would love to see that collaboration continue. So while you're talking with us about these opportunities, that we're also making sure that we're putting the word out through our channels to all of our constituents so they're aware. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. And Ms. Hayes, we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And I know you have several more slides, so I guess if
This
you
will go
would-
by really quick.
Okay.
Really quick. Okay, first, before I get into all the pictures, I do want to thank my leadership team, Administrator Brown, all of our ACAs for helping forge a path forward for our grants here in the county. It's been really a privilege to be able to work with a leadership team that is very supportive. I also want to thank council for all of your support. I have an old military commander that I worked for who used to say, if it ain't right at the top, it ain't going to be right at the bottom. And I can assure you it's right at the top here at Richland County. And so I'm going to show you a few pictures here because this is where our education and outreach goes. We have a tenant program. We have a housing program that we offer. We help folks try to understand their rights as a tenant, as a homeowner, and we know that during the pandemic, a lot of folks are getting put out of their apartment complexes, out of their homes. So we provide a lot of education and outreach throughout the community. We partner with our sister communities, so City of Columbia. I talk frequently with a lot of our other city managers to try to help the process through with our HUD grants. And so we'll go to the next slide. So a lot of our work is based with nonprofit organizations. You know, our nonprofits provide a valuable service, but right here you'll see our Well Partners Dental Clinic and United Way. Public health care has been a major issue, particularly since the pandemic. Our two most vulnerable populations are our aging population and our youth. So we provide through our nonprofits dental care, ophthalmology appointments to help those that would not be able to afford this care in other situations. So we'll go to hop to the next slide. So we also provide infrastructure assistance. So this is the Homeworks of America. Roy is pictured here. He's a really cool guy that's worked with Habitat for Humanity. I've worked with him on numerous occasions, learned how to install windows, nailed decks down. He's awesome. And he's helping with our affordable housing crisis. So for many of our folks that are aging in place, he gets out there to help with deck ramps, ADA compliant functions for their home. So we'll jump to the next slide. All right, public service. Okay, this is like my favorite one. When I work at Richland County, I don't feel like I'm performing work. I really love what I do here for the county. And these funds really travel down to some of our very important programs that we have here. To the left, you'll see Homeless No More has an after-school educational program for our unhoused youth. And to the right, you'll see our Boys and Girls Club of a field trip. And, you know, these resources that go to our community are really designed to help grow capacity. And so, you know, when they are performing these roles and they are going about their business, you know, we are inside of that effort really helping to grow our children and our aging populations. But I want to thank everyone here, but I also have to thank my team. I have the most amazing personnel in my department. They keep me going. Before I came up, they were hyping me up. And, you know, I have amazing people that know this community well, research, analyze, talk to people, and aren't scared to grow outside of their comfort zone. And that's what keeps me motivated and going. And I love what I do here serving at Richland County, and I thank all of you for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. You did great. I think you checked all three of your things, right? Okay, almost. You're almost there. Administrator Brown?
So for the next portion of the strategic planning forum, for the members of the audience who won't be participating in this process, which just basically will be county council, county attorney, myself, ACA Thomas. To those of you who will be traveling on behalf of Richland County Council and county administration, be safe. Thank you for your service to Richland County, and we look forward to seeing you back in Richland County next council meeting. So thank you for what you do. Grab lunch. Council members who are going to be here for the next portion, I believe you actually have lunch that you can get and bring back with you here. This next section will be a combination of lunch while you receive a presentation from the legal update from the county attorney, which will be an executive session part conversation. So everybody else will be dismissed. You are more than welcome to take a few minutes to go to do some other things, and we just ask you to be back at the latest by 11:10.